I'm honored to introduce the next speaker, Silvia Davis. Sylvia earned her spot as a finalist at Toastmasters World Championship 2023. Her gift for storytelling has also led her to become the award-winning author. 5 to 7 minutes of speech writing is so hard. Can you imagine writing a book? And that to an award-winning author? Oh my God. Recognized for her engaging presentation, she has earned accolades for her ability to inspire, motivate, and educate people, her audiences, enabling her listeners with the skill to become resilient and persevere through the world that is becoming more challenging and stressful by the day. Please help me welcome Sylvia Davis, Navigating Stress in Stressful World. Sylvia.
Thank you. Good morning. Happy 100th anniversary, Toastmasters. This is such an amazing feat and an amazing moment, and it's awesome that we all get to share it together. 100 years of people aspiring to become more effective communicators. 100 years of like-minded people finding that safe space where they could all come together and help each other learn how to use their voice to share a message, no matter whether that message was being shared with a crowd or just with a group of friends. And speaking of sharing a message with a group of friends, I need to go ahead and just put something out there right now. If you've heard me speak before, more than likely, including yesterday, what you heard was contest Sylvia. In contest, Sylvia has to make sure that she forms proper sentences at all times and that she never uses slang, because contest Sylvia speaks in front of judges. But I'm not in front of judges today. I'm in front of friends. And you know how you speak one way on the job, but you speak a completely different way when you're with your homies? Y'all my homies. So that being said, I'm just going to go ahead and put all the grammarians in the room on notice. You might want to fasten your seatbelt because part of this ride might get a little bit bumpy. So, real quick, let me ask you this question. When you think of stress and how it impacts you, what are some of the words that immediately come to mind? And I want you to just go ahead and yell out some of them. What are some of the things that come to mind when you think about how stress impacts you? Ah! Perfect. Anything else?
Get out.
Get out.
Run away.
Run away. Anything else?
I used to have hair.
Bald, losing your hair. Okay, so basically what I'm gathering is all of these negative thoughts come to mind when you think of stress. But would you believe me if I told you that stress is also responsible for increasing your energy, creating excitement, strengthening your focus, and giving you a positive outlook? And that all begins with what you think and believe. There was a study that was done that had 30,000 participants, and this study spanned a length of 8 years. And in this study, they asked the participants 2 questions. Number 1, do you feel like you are under a lot of stress? And number 2, do you believe that stress is harmful? Of those 30,000 participants, the ones who said, yes, I am under a lot of stress, and yes, I believe stress to be harmful, what they found is that those people had a 43% increased risk of dying prematurely. But there was another group who also said, yes, we're under a lot of stress, but no, we don't believe stress to be harmful. And what the study showed was that in that group of people, they had no more of an increased risk of dying than those who said they did not suffer from a lot of stress. So what that study showed was that it wasn't stress alone that caused us harm. It was rather what we believed about stress and our level of resistance to it. So in other words, if you could change your mindset about stress, you can actually change the level of harm or the level of impact that it has on your body. So my goal today is to help all of us here start to think differently about stress, and in doing so, empower you with the ability to actually use stress to your advantage. Now think about that for a second. How would that impact your life if in the moment when you start to feel stressed out or overwhelmed, if you could have the forethought to discern what is causing you that stress in that moment, figure out what to do, and then proceed in a way that you're actually able to use it to your advantage? What kind of benefit would that bring into your life?
Same.
And not screaming or losing our hair, exactly.
Too late.
So stress does not exist to hurt you. It is not your nemesis, it's actually your ally. It is not made to hold you back, but to actually help to propel you forward. Most of us see stress as this evil entity that's lurking out there waiting to pounce and devour, but that is simply not the truth. And I'm going to use the first part of this talk to give you arguments to build my case for why I say that that is the fact. And then the second part of the argument, or the second part of my talk, I'm going to give you 3 different techniques that you can use to help you when you do start to feel stressed and overwhelmed so that you can properly navigate that stress. Now notice I said navigate, not eradicate. And the reason I say that is because it is simply not possible to eradicate stress. You can't do it. And luckily, it's not even necessary for you to do so. Now, before I get into delivering the promises I just made, there's one other thing I need to do. I need to tell you a little bit about me. And the reason I need to do that is because that is a bit of feedback that I got from another talk that I did. They said, Sylvia, your message was great, but who in the world are you? Now, I want the people that I talk to feel comfortable with me. And how can you feel comfortable with someone that you don't know anything about? So is it okay with you if I take about 90 seconds just to tell you, those of you on Zoom, they're nodding their heads, so I got the permission to go ahead. I believe that everyone is born to serve a purpose that's going to help mankind. And I believe that everyone is born with a gift that is going to help them to live in that purpose. And when you use your gift and live in your purpose, you are living a life that is best for you and full of joy, and that is your greatest life. How many of you here share that belief? Okay, that's great. Now, I noticed there were a couple of hands in the room that did not go up. And that's okay, because had you asked me that question 7 years ago, my hand would not have gone up either. My hand would not have gone up either. I stand here in front of you today as an award-winning author, an award-winning speaker, and like in my introduction, somehow, by the grace of God, I actually made it to the championship last year, to the World Championship of Public Speaking on the world stage for Toastmasters. I'm also the current Arizona chapter winner for their Last Story Standing contest. And I stand before you with the confidence to do this, and I love learning from people like yourselves every single day. Now, normally in a speaker's origin story, this would be the moment where they would share with you their rock bottom moment. This would be the time where they would tell you that maybe they had to overcome a stutter, or maybe they had to choose between paying for food for their children or paying their rent, or they had to live in their car, or they suffered some kind of addiction that they had to get through. And then they would tell us about how they persevered through all of that, and they made their way to the other side, and now they live this fantastic, great life. And then all of us would be motivated and inspired by listening to that. But I don't have a rock bottom story. And thankfully, I don't believe most of us do. That does not mean that I've not had my struggles, because I most definitely have, but I have never had that kind of a rock bottom moment. I've lived a very average, very uneventful life. But what I've found is that sometimes it's the absence of the pain of hitting rock bottom that keeps us deceived into believing that average is good enough. It wasn't until my children became adults. And let me just go ahead and get this out the way. Yes, my children are adults. I have a 24-year-old, and my oldest about to turn 29. So it wasn't until they became adults and I realized the example that I had set for them. Their whole lives, I had told them certain things. Now, you know, your children do what you show them, not what you tell them. And their entire lives, I had told them, baby, you could do what you want to do. You could be what you want to be. You can go where you want to go. But the example that I had set for them was one of mediocrity and average and how to settle. So I knew the only way that I could could get them to live in their purpose was to have the courage to start living in mine. So today, I use my God-given gift, this ability to speak, to bring messages to businesses, individuals, and groups, and to help people understand that they all have a purpose and that they can live their greatest life. And my message is, rock bottom does not have to be your catalyst to greatness. So now that we got that out of the way, let me ask you this question. How many of you here can remember your icebreaker speech? All right, now think back to those days. What did it feel like when you delivered your icebreaker speech? Were you nervous? Were you excited? Did you get those butterflies in your stomachs even though you knew there's only going to be like 3 people there? Did you feel that way? I can remember my hands were shaking visibly. I was talking and I actually looked down at my hands and saw them shaking. And I added an impromptu line in my speech to address it so that it would look like I was doing it on purpose. I sure did. I can show you the tape. Now, think back to those days leading up to your icebreaker speech. What did that feel like? Were you still a little bit nervous in anticipation? Did you want to make sure that you had it memorized the way you wanted to? Did you go over it? Did you write it? Did you put in that effort to make sure that your icebreaker speech was as good as you could get it to be? Okay. What you felt during your icebreaker speech and what you felt in the days leading up to your icebreaker speech, all due to stress. And yes, without stress, you wouldn't have had those butterflies and those shaking hands while you were giving your icebreaker speech, but you also would not have felt that excitement and that motivation in the days leading up to your icebreaker speech. Physiologically, the way your body responds to excitement is the exact same way that your body responds to fear, which makes it easy sometimes to get the two confused. Have you ever wanted to do something, dreamed about it, aspired for it, and then when the time came and you had the choice to actually do it, you started to feel sick. Maybe you got a headache. Your hands started shaking again. And to avoid that feeling, you didn't do it. Maybe, do you think it's possible that in your life you've ever mistaken your body's cues for excitement as signs of fear? I know that I did. And it happened when I was a long, long time ago when I was a kid. Ever since, for as long as I can remember, wanted to act. I wanted to be on stage, whether it was in front of a camera or actually on a stage in front of a live audience, it didn't matter. I just daydreamed about it. I wanted it so bad. I would watch television and movies, and I would memorize certain scenes, and then I would come into my bedroom, I would lock the door, and I would reenact those scenes. And when I say reenact, I don't mean try to do it like I saw those actors do it. No. I would Sylvia-nize it. I would go over it over and over again until it felt believable. And even if the scene involved the character dying, like they got shot, I would be, and I'd fall on the ground. And then I'd get back up and say, no, that didn't feel natural. To this day, I'm thankful to say I still don't know what it feels like to get shot, but at that moment in time, I'm like, no, I gotta make it more real. But whenever I thought of taking my show on the road, in other words, leaving my bedroom, I would get that nauseous feeling. When I was in high school and I even thought about taking drama classes, I would get sick because I would know that I would have to be up in front of people and actually doing it. And it made me feel so uncomfortable that I was willing to do anything not to feel that way, including not pursuing that thing that I wanted to do for as long as I could remember. If only I had known then what I know now. If only I had seen that as my body's way of saying, girl, I'm gonna get you ready. You might not like how it feels, but I'm pumping you up. I'm getting you ready. That's how I felt when I was being introduced. I wanted to run out, but I stayed. Your body does that to you. And sometimes, because we want to not feel uncomfortable, we'll run away. We do that, don't we? We run away from that which makes us feel uncomfortable. But stress, at its fundamental definition, stress is how your body responds to demands. And whether that demand is positive or negative depends upon you. Because stress has two sides. There is the chronic distress, which causes the headaches and the nausea and the butterflies, all of those things we think about, but there's also eustress, which is spelled eustress. And eustress is that happy side of stress. It's what we feel when we're about to get on a roller coaster, or maybe on our wedding day, or when we're about to go on vacation. So stress is nothing more than the reaction that demands have on our body. And whether that is distress or eustress depends on nothing more than how you feel and believe about it. And I can prove that to you right now. How many of you joined Toastmasters because you were scared to death of public speaking and you wanted to get better? Okay. How many of you in here joined Toastmasters because you were excited about public speaking and you wanted to get better? All right. So the stressor is exactly the same, public speaking. The desired outcome, wanting to get better, is exactly the same. But for a portion of this room, it was distress. You were afraid. And for another portion of this room, it was eustress. You were excited. The only difference between these two groups of people is what you felt and believed about that same stressor. So there is such a thing as happy stress. But I know, trust me, I know, there's some of you in here who are listening to me, and you're like, Sylvia, the lies you tell. Ain't no such thing as good stress. Grammarians, I told you. You're out there thinking, stress gave my uncle a heart attack. Stress gives my sister migraines. Stress gave grandma the sugar. In other words, diabetes, because that's what we called it in my house growing up. And if you still feel that way, I'm going to tell you, I was that way too. I used to think that stress was the enemy and needed to be avoided at all cost. But now I see stress kind of the way I see food. I'm going to explain that, don't worry. How many of you have ever had to watch what you eat? Maybe you wanted to gain a few pounds, lose a few. Now, I know more hands need to go up than that. How many of you ever had to, even if you had to go in for a doctor's appointment and you had to fast, you had to watch what you ate. You had to be careful about that. Well, in 2020, I went in for what I felt was a routine doctor's appointment. And I sat down with my doctor, and he dropped a bomb on me. He said, Mrs. Davis, I need to talk to you about your blood work. It looks like you have an A1C of 6.0. I said, cool. He said, no, Mrs. Davis, you don't understand. 6.4 would mean you're diabetic. 6.0 means you're pre-diabetic. Now, I might not have known what an A1C was, but I knew diabetes wasn't nothing to play with. Grammarians, let that slide. So I got real serious real quick. And I said, okay, doc, well, what do I need to do? How do I fix this? He goes, don't worry, there is time to reverse it. I said, great, okay, what do I need to do? You say it, I will do it. I am that one. And he said, okay, first thing you need to do is develop an exercise regimen. I said, you know what? That's also financially a good thing for me to do because I joined a gym 5 months ago and ain't been in 6. I said, so I got that. That's good. He said, the next thing you're going to need to do is cut your carbs. I said, say what now? He said, you need to bring your carbs down to about 50 grams a day. I said, I ate more than that on the car ride to this appointment. He said, you can fill in the gaps with healthy fats. I said, like bacon? And he said, and I said, but you know what though? That's good because pork skins and Tabasco sauce, that's my jam. I can do that all day. And he said, Mrs. Davis, here's the name and a number of nutritionists. I suggest you give them a call right quick and in a hurry. Toastmasters, if the last 4 years have taught me nothing else, it has taught me that carbs are what makes food taste good. That being said, my point is this. My food, if I didn't watch it, if I wasn't careful about it, my food had the capacity to hurt me. But that did not mean that food, unfettered, could hurt me. Something that I could not avoid, something that I needed. I needed to gain control over it. I needed to adapt to it so that it didn't cause me harm. I could not eradicate it, so I had to navigate it. Stress is the same way. You cannot eradicate it, so you have to navigate it. Exactly. Remember, stress is responsible for when you get excited. Why would you want to eradicate that? All right? So what you have to do, if you want to really get a good handle on it, is actually change your mindset about stress. Now that we know that there is distress, that chronic stress that makes us feel bad and worry and fearful, and then there's eustress, that happy stress that makes us excited. Now that we understand that these two different stress exist, and now that we understand the importance of knowing which one we're feeling at the moment, what do we do if we have examined and we find out that it is truly something that is frightening us, something that is bad that we want to get away from? How do we handle that in the moment? So I have 3 techniques that I want to share with you on how to do that. The first thing that you can do is build your resilience. I love talking about building resilience. That's my favorite thing to talk about. It is like a superpower, not only when it comes to managing stress, but just when it comes to living life in general. Resilient people have the ability they face their frustrations, their anger, their depression, but resilient people do not allow themselves to get stuck. They are able to bounce back from challenges. And it's this emotional agility that gives them an upper hand when it comes to dealing with stress. Now, there are several books out there that can help you with how to build your resilience, because fortunately, that is something that can be built. If you don't believe you're resilient today, you can become resilient tomorrow. You can work on that. You can increase that. Now, I'm going to share with you something that is probably not commonly said, and it goes against what a lot of us have heard. But this has been my number one way to build my own resilience. And that is, I do not believe that everything happens for a reason. I don't believe it. The reason I don't believe that is because I can't find any foundation to base that on. It's not even, I'm a Christian, and that's not even scripturally supported. But I'll tell you what I do believe. I believe that we can learn from everything that happens. So what I do to build my resilience is I have learned to cherish the lesson so I do not hate the challenge. And that is one way that you can build your resilience. When you start to look for the higher meaning from what you're going through, even though you might not be able to find a reason for it, if you can learn something from it, you will bounce back faster from that challenge. The second thing is to be present and in the moment. I come from a relatively large family. I am the oldest of 5, and I look the youngest. Now, I say that because they're going to watch this recording. And when you come from a family like mine, we whenever we can, we hit that jab. And the only thing that makes me sad is that they're not here in person to hear me say that. In 2003, I became pregnant with my 3rd child. And my sister Lucretia became pregnant with her 2nd. But Lucretia, a year earlier, her 1st child was stillborn. And so every day during that pregnancy, she carried this worry with her that her 2nd pregnancy was going to suffer the same fate. Now, worry is something that happens in the mind, while stress is something that happens in the body. And when you have excessive worry, you activate the body's sympathetic nervous system, which releases stress hormones. So basically, if you live in a constant state of worry, you live in a constant state of stress. And the body was not built to live that way. About 12 weeks into my pregnancy, I miscarried. And this sent my sister into a spiral. We're on the phone one day, and after she expressed her concern and grief over my loss, she started talking about what she was feeling. So I asked her, I said, well, Lucretia, how are you right now? And she said she was fine. I said, and how is your baby right now? And she said, the baby was fine. I said, well, sis, do you realize that every minute you spend worried about what might happen is a minute you don't spend enjoying the fact that your baby is fine? Focusing on the trauma of the past or worrying about imagined trauma in the future robs you of the joy of today. So what do you do when you're in that moment and you find yourself excessively worrying like that? Okay, and you feel that stress. Well, the first thing you want to do is acknowledge it. You don't try to bury it. Don't try to hide from it. Don't try to run from it. You know you're feeling that way. Acknowledge that you're feeling that way. And then the next thing that you do is examine it. Is it something you're really excited about and you need to run towards it? Or is it something like in Lucretia's case, where she's scared to death of something happening? In Lucretia's case, she was worried about things that she was imagining. But once she was able to really verbalize that and realize, even though she'd already realized it, she'd never addressed it. And she never had that conversation with herself saying, I'm not enjoying today. My baby is fine today. I'm missing out on all the beauty of being pregnant today. And once she got that mentality, she was able to push back against that fear. And I'm very happy to say that she went on to deliver a very healthy, very beautiful baby girl. And a few years after that, she had a very healthy, very beautiful baby boy. Now, I saw some people in the room want to applaud. Lucretia's going to watch this, so go ahead. Let her hear you. And just a word to my niece and nephew. Auntie, love you. Okay. So, now, the next thing, the third thing I want to share with you that you can do to help you when you do notice that it's distress. And this is probably the most important thing, but also probably the hardest thing. And that is prioritize you. How many times do we put everything and everyone else above taking care of ourselves? I would love to tell you, go into the gym and work out for an hour, but luckily I don't have to tell you that. It doesn't even have to take more than just a few 10-minute breaks throughout the day for you to regroup and settle and do something where you prioritize yourself. But we so often don't do that. Well, I'm here to tell you, you are more valuable than your mortgage. You are more valuable than your car payment. You are more valuable than your light bill. You are more valuable than that project deadline. You are more valuable than what your boss says about you on a piece of paper. And all of these things we tend to put above ourselves. Now, when I was telling my daughter this, she's like, but yeah, Mom, but what do I do? I have to take care of all these things. And I told her, baby girl, prioritizing you, putting yourself above all these things does not mean that all of these things somehow disappear or go away. Trust me, they will be there. But if you switch those things and you put all of these things above taking care of you, this dynamic right here could cost you everything. My sister Leslie married her husband Dennis a little over 20 years ago. Dennis had a bit of a hard time finding that job for him, that job that made him feel like he was doing everything he wanted to do for his family. But he did finally find that job, and that job brought in a lot of money. And after a little while of working on that job, my sister and Dennis started to make plans. They had a son who was a senior in high school who was about to graduate, and they said, you know what? We can pay cash for him to go to college. We can just write checks. They were going to be able to pay the mortgage on their house. They were going to pay it off. Leslie was going to be able to retire at age 55. I was secretly hating on her for that, but she was going to be able to retire when she was 55. They had made plans to buy an RV and travel the country. They had made plans to be able to travel and go see the world. All of this. And Dennis was stretching himself thin because he wanted all of these things to happen. But Dennis knew that he had a lot of stress in his life, but he also believed that stress to be harmful. So when his body started giving him little signs that he needed to slow down, when his loved ones were telling him, you need to slow down, all he could think about, Leslie needs to retire at 55. We need to pay cash for our son's college. We need to get this house paid off. So he continued to push himself. One night, during a phone call, a business call, he had a very heated argument with a vendor that he was working with. The argument got so loud that my nephew and my sister could hear him yelling from the other room. My nephew comes into the room and tells him, Dad, you need to chill out. You need to slow down. And Dennis just shoot him off, said, no, I got this. Not that long afterwards, my sister also comes into the room. Babe, you need to calm down. You're going to give yourself a stroke. He shooed her off as well. 6 hours after that phone call, what my sister warned him about happened. Dennis suffered a massive stroke. And Dennis had told my sister and my nephew that if anything ever happened to him that caused him to be in a vegetative state, he wanted them to let him go. Here they are in this situation. And what happened was, and this was during COVID, so my sister was at his bedside whenever she could be. She's at his bedside. He's in the hospital. She is tearing herself up inside, trying to decide, do I really let him go? If anything else happens, do I really let him go? She didn't want to, but she wanted to respect his wishes. At that moment, as she's sitting there next to him, pretty much in tears, and Dennis had not spoken 2 coherent words since the stroke, and this was maybe a couple of weeks later. He opened his eyes, and he looked at her, and he said, I'm coming back to you. And then he closed his eyes, went back to sleep. And my sister said, that's all I needed, baby. We gonna fight. And I gotta tell you, I can't even imagine the kind of love that will bring you out of a stroke long enough to tell your wife, I'm coming back. But that's exactly what he did. Dennis was in the hospital for 4 months. He's paralyzed on his left side. They had to remove a portion of his skull to allow his brain to swell. It's been 3 years since that night. Dennis can, with help, he can get out of the bed, he can get out of the chair, he can take a few steps. He still hasn't regained any usage of his left arm, and he's in pain daily, and he struggles. Nothing that they had planned is going to happen. My nephew actually had to postpone his first semester in college because he needed to stay home to help his mom take care of his dad. The house will not be paid off early. My sister will not retire at 55 because her job is she's now the primary breadwinner, and her benefits are more important now than ever before. Dennis now struggles with what's his purpose. And I told him about this talk that I was going to be doing. And he said, if he could help to keep one person from going down the path that he went down, maybe something good could come from this nightmare that he's living. And I believe that there are still some of you in here who probably are saying, Silvia, I hear you, and I will prioritize me right after this. Right after I take care of this. If that's you, my brother-in-law has a message for you.
There's nothing in this life that's worth losing your life over You might think you could work 25, 26 hours a day, but you cannot. It's not worth it. Keeping your chill is very important. Do not allow people to stress you out. It's not worth it. I'm sitting up here watching my wife work herself down to a nub, and she's working a regular job, and I'm another job for her, and it hurts. We had two very nice incomes, and she wants to retire by the time she's 55, and I have figured out a plan how to make that happen. It just so happened that I overexerted myself. I did not listen to her when she said, you need to take a weekend off. You need to take some days off. If people are telling you to calm down or take some days off, follow that advice. Getting some rest is not going to hurt you. The money you can make today, you can make tomorrow. I've lost my business because of stress, and I was way overdoing it, but I kept hearing the warning signs, and I didn't pay any attention to them. My main thing was my goal of getting our home paid off before my wife was 55. And I know I hurt a lot of people by being hurt, but I'm working very hard to come back. But you don't want to put yourself in that place. It's not worth it. And I don't think I know it all, but I just figured I knew what I was doing. I was getting business moved. It didn't work. One thing I would say is the people that I was trying to do this for were the people that I ended up hurting. People used to think of me as smart and even maybe pseudo-intellectual. But how smart was that? Getting stressed out and having a massive stroke. That's not smart at all. I don't want your family to go through what my family has gone through. It's an incredibly painful experience for all.
In closing, I'd like to leave you with this image. Imagine, if you will, a vast and turbulent ocean where storms brew without warning. In these unpredictable waters sails a lone ship, your ship. You are the captain. As you sail your ship, you're faced with a daunting reality, and that is that these storms, like stress, cannot be avoided, only navigated. The dark clouds gather swiftly, the winds howl, and the waves are towering, threatening to overpower you. But you've been through storms like this before. You know that panic will not serve you. And just as a captain uses his instruments and his training, you also use your knowledge to help you navigate these stressful waters. You now know to build your resilience so you can control your emotions and bounce back from challenges. You also know to be present and in the moment, because focusing on the storms of yesterday or worrying about the storms of tomorrow will serve you no purpose today. And you understand the importance of taking care of you, prioritizing your mentality, your physicalness, and your spirituality, realizing that if you are not your best, you cannot adequately control your ship. As the storm rages and you are faced with challenge after challenge, and with every wave and every shift of the wind, you use these as a lesson. And you've learned to cherish these lessons so you don't hate these storms. With every shift of the wind, you learn. And as you proceed, with every storm that you conquer, you build your faith and you build your confidence so that you can battle the next storm with even more confidence. As the dawn breaks and the seas calm, your ship emerges, dinged but beautiful, battered but unbroken, a little roughed up, but functional, and still with the ability to move forward to infinity and
Anyone has questions?
What was the line in your icebreaker that was impromptu with your hand shaking?
it fits so well. So my icebreaker speech was about not being enough. And what I said was, I said, have you ever felt like you're not tall enough, you're not short enough, you're not light enough, you're not dark enough, you're not pretty enough, you're not ugly enough, you're not fat enough, you're not skinny enough? And then finally I looked in the mirror and I said, with hands shaking, enough is enough.
Hey Sylvia, that was an amazing speech. Stress, everybody can connect with how to handle stress, and you've enlightened us so much. So one big part of your speech was, one of the 3 points was, prioritize yourself. That's more important than anything else in your life. I have a contradiction, and you're a mom, you raised 3 kids. So how do you just do, sorry, okay. Are you sure?
Yeah.
Well, you never ate, so you might as well have 3. Doesn't matter, yeah. Okay, so my question is, how do you justify your suggestion in line, prioritize yourself more than anything else in your life, in the context of your kids around you?
That's very easy. I work with a group of women. I had about 400 women join a group with me. And one of their main things that they said was they felt guilty about going to the gym to take care of themselves because their child needed this or their child needed that. They would always say, I don't have time to do this for me. Because I said, but I bet you anything, if your baby came to you and needed something, you'd find the time to do that, wouldn't you? And the answer was always yes. But here's the thing. I cannot be my best I want the best for them. I have to be my best in order to do my best. So that is how prioritizing yourself doesn't mean neglecting everybody else. So I can take care of me because here's the thing. Nobody else can take care of me. Nobody else can take care of you. And just like Dennis, you just heard him. The people he was doing all of that for are the people who are now suffering. So yes, that's how I prioritize it. I prioritize taking care of me because I want to take care of them.
Thank you. Well said.
Thank you. I have one question. I told my wife that passion is important. You chase your passion, money will follow. But it backfired. Now she doesn't have time for me. She's so passionate about dance. She's teaching dance lessons. So she's doing so well. I'm very impressed that she did it. But the challenge is, how do you recover? You put so much into passion. All your time goes to that. And she does not think recovery is important to succeed, to deliver more the next day, to be more productive next day. What kind of advice do you have for my wife? Hopefully she's not listening.
I would have to say, I think we all have those passions, those things that if time was not an issue, we would spend all of our time doing that thing. And I think you just have to prioritize. You have to I have a calendar and I time block certain things. And so that would be my suggestion, is like get a schedule and realize, okay, I need to have this time set apart to do that and this time set apart to do this. And then don't feel bad if something has to change, then let it change. You can go with the flow. But I would definitely say get a hold of the schedule and look at how you're spending your time. You would be surprised at how much of our day is wasted. I mean, one of the things I could suggest is just do a time log just for 1 week and just time yourself. How much time are you spending on social media? Y'all, I can go onto social media to search something for my job and end up watching videos about painting my nails. It just doesn't matter. I mean, it's easy to go down that. It's easy to go down that line. So I definitely would suggest doing what you are passionate about, but keeping it into a situation where nothing else in your life has to suffer because you're doing what you're passionate about. And I would think, let your clock be your guide on that one and pre-plan it so that you don't have to feel guilty and the time doesn't just run away with you.
I just wanted to say, firstly, thank you so much, Sylvia, for that incredible speech. I was immersed completely, and I could feel all sorts of inspiring thoughts coming into my mind. My question is, how has putting yourself first changed your relationship with yourself, and then therefore impacted your relationship to everything in your life?
Thank you. Thank you. That's a good question. So how has putting myself first impacted my relation with everything? Okay. So in 2018, well, actually, it was earlier than that. I had a cancer scare. I went to the doctor and they're like, we see some cells here. I still didn't think that much of it because I was pretty healthy, but it turned out that it was cancerous cells. So in my mind, I'm already like, oh, I got to write the eulogy for my kids because they'll never get all the good stuff. And I got to, so I'm making all these plans. I'm like, Lord, this is how I go. But because I had prioritized me, because I had already started going to the gym and I was already eating right, doing all those things, one thing that I did not have was regret. If cancer is what was going to take me out, then I didn't have to live with thinking, oh, I wish I had taken better care of myself. I wish I had done this. And the other thing that did for me is my body was like, okay, it's in prime condition. It's like I'm primed. I haven't diluted it with alcohol and drugs. I exercised and I was in prime shape for a woman of my age. So I think it helped me to bounce back. So to answer your question, when you prioritize you don't have to live with, how many of you have you ever known or seen someone who they didn't prioritize them, they abused their body, they worked too hard, and then they found themselves later in life in a condition that they wish they were never in. And it was all because of the choices that they had made years prior. I had a relative who was very close to me. I loved him so much, and he spent his last days in a retirement home. And to me, I always say that my worst fear is being buried alive. That's one of my worst fears. But to me, and a lot of you might think, oh, well, okay, that's a scary feeling, but how many of us does that really happen to? Well, it happens to a lot of us. And the reason I say that is it's almost like being buried alive when your mind is still active, but your body can't keep up. He was in this retirement home. He wanted to go places and do things, but couldn't because his body couldn't keep up. To me, that's the same as being buried alive. So when you prioritize you, again, it does not mean all those other things go away. It does not even mean that all of those other things have to suffer. It just means you can live a life without regrets. You can live a life knowing that you are your best so you can do your best for the people that you love.
Hi, Sylvia.
Hi.
I'm a big fan of yours. And today I really appreciate you sharing your life stories. And I noticed how engaged everyone is. And I noticed how you distilled your message into concise phrases and you told stories, and also your delivery was perfect. Everything was woven together, so engaging, so shiny. I'm wondering your journey up to here, because everyone has lives and stories, could be like yours. How would you help us? How did you get here, your journey, and how the Toastmasters, how you make most use of Toastmasters?
Okay. So All right, so let me rephrase that, make sure I got it right. You want to know, like, how did I get to this point, and how did Toastmasters help, and how do you, like, weave in your stories and turn it into something like this? Is that your question?
Yeah, just a few tips or anything you could share with us.
All right, first off, I want to say, start looking, like I said, cherish the lesson so you don't hate the challenge. Start looking for lessons. There is a lesson almost in everything. And I started to believe that right during COVID, and I know this is going to sound crazy, but y'all bear with me. So I had gotten into this mindset of there's a lesson in everything. And I know I went a little bit overboard, so I'm going to share something with y'all that's a little bit crazy. I had to turn the park into a gym because you couldn't go to the gym. And I remember I would run a few steps, and then I would drop, and I would do push-ups. And one time when I dropped to do push-ups, I saw there was a little line of ants. And the first ant, the ant in the lead, was carrying like a little piece of bread. He had all these other ants following behind him. They weren't carrying anything that was following behind him. And I thought, ooh, that's deep. I said, there's a lesson in that. There is a lesson. You got this leader. He's doing everything, and their subordinates are following him. So my suggestion would be start paying attention and carry with you. You don't even have to carry with you. You've got your phone, and many of us carry a voice recorder right here on our wrist. When something happens, you can immediately just go ahead and leave a voice recording. And so you will forget. No matter how great the idea is and how much you think you'll never forget, you will forget. Another thing that I do is I sleep with a pen and pad on my nightstand. And if there's something that's really bothering me or something that I'm trying to figure out an idea or a topic, I will fall asleep with that as the last thing on my mind. And you would be surprised at how many times I wake up in the middle of the night with an idea. The idea might be stupid, but once I write it down, and once I have the opportunity to look at it in the light of day, usually I can extract something from it. So life will present you with everything that you need when you start looking for it. You would be surprised if you're not looking how many of those opportunities will just pass you by. Now, how Toastmasters helped me? Things just like this. When I first joined Toastmasters, I was speaking every chance I got. I thought they was going to get sick of me. Grammarians, I told you. If nobody else stepped up, like I would speak one week, and if the speaking slots wasn't filled the next week, I would ask to speak. And I would challenge myself to do more talks, to do different talks, and I would push myself. So that's how, and to have a captive audience, and to have people to give you that honest feedback, it was amazing. And so that's how Toastmasters helped me, and that's how I get the stories and the ideas that I have. You just got to look for them and pay attention.
Hi, Silvia. My name is Paul Shi. I'm the president of A2C Toastmaster Club. I'm really feel inspired by your speech today, and also honestly were touched by Danny's story. This really confirmed that my recent decision is right. I had a defining moment. I had a physical exam and a lot of numbers in the boundary. And I said, I cannot live that way. Mm-hmm. I have 3 kids too to take care. I have a family. So this really, thank you so much, confirmed, my decision is right. I made a decision. I start a morning routine to walk for 20 to 30 minutes in the morning, the first thing I do. So really feel good and feel energized. I know you are also the winning author for the book, Living a Parable, Finding Lessons in Unlikely Experience. I'm really interested to learn what motivated you to write that book.
Thank you for that. And in case y'all didn't hear, the title of the book, Living a Parable, Finding Lessons in Unlikely Experiences. What motivated me to write that book was when like I said, I had been living a very average, mediocre life, but I knew I was capable of more. I knew that, but I didn't know what more was. I didn't know what it looked like. So I would pray all the time, like, Lord, what am I supposed to be doing? And then it was a friend asked me to say a prayer one day at her wedding, to say grace over the food. And when I speak, I like to put humor in it, because when I hear the audience laugh, I feel like you're there with me, you like me, and it calms me. Can't do that during a prayer. So I put a lot of time and effort into writing the prayer. And then when I said it, I was so nervous. After the prayer, I was kind of in my own head. I was in my head, and I went and I sat down. And when I looked at my husband, I said, "Did they clap?" And he said, "Yeah, they did." Now, I don't know about you guys, but I've never been anywhere where an audience clapped after the prayer. That was my first clue. So I decided maybe I should speak. Maybe I could write things and speak. So this is yet another piece of advice. If there's something you want to do, while you have to be careful about, because there are haters out there, you still should share what it is that you want to do, if it means that much to you. Because I was nervous. I was in my 40s, and I was afraid to say out loud, I want to be a speaker, because I thought people would look at me like I was crazy, like, girl, you old. And but I fought against that, and I told people, because if people don't know, people can't help. So when I told somebody, they told me about Toastmasters. And I joined Toastmasters at the end of 2019, so I could get practice speaking in front of people. And I joined Toastmasters just in time for the country to shut down, and I couldn't speak in front of people. But I didn't want to lose that momentum. So I said, well, what do speakers do when they can't speak? They write a book. That's how I wrote a book. I never aspired to be an author whatsoever. And the book is basically, it's categorized as a devotional, but there are stories in there of me growing up as the oldest of 5 and as me being a wife and a mother. And the stories are comical. And then I relate those stories back to biblical lessons. So I had a lot of fun. And it's on Amazon. If you look, you can read what other people have written about it. And most of the feedback you'll see is, I laughed out loud. You know, I read through all the stories, and then I had to go back and do the biblical lessons, because, you know, they just had a good time reading the stories.
Well, thank you so much, first of all, for sharing so much of you with us to our benefit. I guess the most crucial question is, what skin cream do you use?
You know, again, I would have to say, it's genetics. Cause I can't take credit for this. If you were to see my father is in his 70s, and he does not look like he is in his 70s. When people find out that I am his daughter, they're like, "You've got to be kidding me. You've got a daughter in her 30s?" And I'm like, and then they find out I'm in my 50s. So yeah, but I will say this though. Even when I was in my 20s, I did start taking care of my skin, the whole making sure you wipe up and, you know, clean your face and all that stuff. But it's been very sporadic. But I have to give most of, if I do not look my age, then I have to give credit to that, to just probably genetics. And I will be 53 in 2 weeks. So.
Thank you, Sylvia. I had actually a recommendation for the gentleman with the wife that has a passion for dance, that maybe he can take dance lessons and share some of that passion, you know, spend time. And so my question to you, Sylvia, is what do you do with your husband that you both share a passion for?
Ooh, girl, I can't talk about that in Toastmasters. You know, honestly, my husband, he's amazing. If it weren't for him, I don't think I would have done half of the things that I've done. He is, I know a lot of people say that, you know, their spouse is their biggest supporter, but he's not only my biggest supporter, he brings to light things about me that I don't notice and that I don't see and that I would let fall by the wayside. And as a matter of fact, he told me, now I was never an athlete. Never. I was never one to compete. So when Toastmasters had a competition, a contest, he was like, "You're pretty competitive. You should compete." I said, "I'm not competitive." He said, "Yes, you are." I said, "No, I'm not." He said, "Yes, you are." I said, "No, I'm not." And he said, "Fine, whatever." I said, "I win." So he's had a lot to do and just always supporting me. But to answer your question, I'm trying to think of that thing that I don't know how we got together because we're so opposite in so many ways, right to our skin color. He's just opposite from me. But we work together. And I think even those things that I do just because he loves them, like fishing. I will go fishing with him, not because I enjoy getting up and fishing or anything like that, but because I enjoy being with him and because he brings out the best in me. So, and I hope I bring out the best in him too.
Hi, Sylvia. My name is Mark. I'm VP of Education for Silicon Valley Speak to Lead here in the Valley, and very much enjoyed your speech, and you're just awesome to watch as a speaker. I joined in 2019, as you did, and I have found that I really enjoy writing speeches. And there's the butterflies and all of that, and I enjoy giving the speeches, and I've been told I give good speeches. What I detest is remembering what to say. I am very particular about what I want to say, and I write it all down, and I refuse to memorize it. I just watch you give an amazing speech from memory. I don't see a teleprompter. How do you do that? And is what you do something I can do?
Yes, great question. So I use a mind trick, and actually in a part of my speech, I skipped a part, and I mentally went back to that part, wove it in, and then came back. And the way that I was able to do that is, Aaron reminded me, it's actually called mind palace, is the terminology for it. So, and it's the first time I've ever had to use this technique because other speeches that I've done, I had a PowerPoint. So it would help me with the cues of where I was, but I knew I didn't have that this time. So everybody knows the layout of their own home, right? So what I did was I have like the very beginning of my speech when I said, "Happy 100th anniversary Toastmasters." I anchored that part of my speech to the entry door into my house. So I see myself coming through that door and a bunch of streamers going off, "Happy anniversary." And that reminded me, that's the part of my speech where I say happy anniversary. And then the next part of my speech was, remember when I said, I'm not not in front of judges, I'm with friends? Well, in my house, the second part of my house, right after my entryway is my piano. So in my mind, I saw a bunch of my friends and I around the piano. And that reminded me to talk about that part of my speech where I talk about friends. And then I go through my entire house. So each part of my speech is tied to a particular part in my house in the order in which I would walk around my house.
So you can actually practice your speech by walking around.
Absolutely. I didn't anticipate that happening, but that's exactly what happened. I can, if I wanted to right now, do my speech in reverse. If I wanted to. If there was a certain time in my speech where I got, like for example, the part that I forgot to give was stress has two sides. There's distress. I forgot that part. And I was already in my bathroom. So in my mind, when I remembered I forgot that part, I went back to that part in my house that addressed that and then came back to the bathroom. And I was able to pick right back up and where I left it. But I don't think that came across to any of you. So that's what I do. I anchor a particular part. And to your point, what happened that I didn't anticipate happening was when I was in the den in my house and I sat in a chair, I would go over that part of my speech. And if there was a part that I was having a particularly hard time remembering, I could just focus on that part. and not have to worry about going through the whole thing, not have to worry about what came before or after. I could just focus on that part. And if there was a part that was too long, I could cut it in half and divide it in a couple of places in my house and then memorize them in pieces. And just, so right now, you guys, mentally, I was going through my home as I was giving that speech. Oh, and one other thing. Thank you so much. One other thing, if you decide to do this, you have to make the images very absurd. They have to be something that's like really crazy. Like I know nobody's there's not gonna be streamers and everything like that when I come through my garage door. My friends are never gonna be at my piano talking like that. The part where I said, how does stress impact you? What are the words coming to mind? In my house, I see my window, my living room window behind me, and I see somebody just firing envelopes with these nasty letters, words on them. And that's what reminded me to ask you, how does stress impact you? So it has to be something a little bit crazy so that your mind kind of locks it in place.